Are you ready to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully? Then let go of whatever no longer serves you to take action now on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Erica will energize and excite you to power up your passionate dream that sets your soul on fire. With Erica's E3 approach, equipping, empowering, and enlightening yourself so you can be yourself for yourself. Get ready and get rooted to live a life without regrets, without what ifs, without should haves, and especially without empty feelings from a life unexplored. This hit show helps you build powerful and intentional roots to live it up, love it up, and let it go. Get fearlessly ready and powerfully rooted in your yes with your host, Erica Gifford Mills, and be fearless about your more and stand in your yes. Now on Get Rooted Radio.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. A big shout out to my new producer today, Emily. Emily, thank you so much, and I'm happy to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Emily, since this is your first time producing the show, I wanted to let you know what Get Rooted Radio is all about, and especially if there's any new listeners out there. So, Get Rooted Radio is designed to empower and enlighten listeners to live their life to the fullest, leaning in, loving themselves, and letting go of what no longer serves them. Hence the tagline, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. And today's episode is truly no exception, and I'm sure you can all see that by the title of Take Control, Own It, and Lose It. Because we spend our lives living according to what they say is right, or the right way to eat, or the right way to behave. And there's also all those shoulds. And I like to say it's the shoulda, coulda, woulda, all those moments. We should do that this way. We should do it that way. I could have done it better, or I should have done it better, or I would have done it better if I had this. You know, whoever determines these right ways, we seem to accept and follow throughout our lives. But when someone else defines those paths for us and determines what is right for us, it doesn't last long term. And a lot of times it backfires. And we miss out on a whole lot of living what we are, our root selves, right? Our core values and truly how we would like. And during this episode, my guest, Lisa Christy, and I will be discussing how to claim for ourselves and take control of our life and determine, embrace, and create our own path according to what we want and choose for ourselves. But before we get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about Lisa. She's a weight loss coach and certified life coach, a fur mom, yay, fellow fur mom, a lover of all things culinary, a bit of a bon vivant, an unshakable optimist with over 20 years of experience dedicated to teaching and coaching others to up-level their lives. Raised in New York City, residing now in New England, Lisa helps women and men become the best versions of themselves by teaching them how to stop overeating, take control, and lose the weight for good. So everybody, welcome Lisa to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So tell listeners, how did you get started in coaching?
Yeah, so it actually found me. I was living in the Burlington, Vermont area at the time and had a fairly large social circle. And everywhere I went, mostly women would gravitate to me, want to talk to me about their stuff. And they just really responded to how I reflected back to them. They could tell that I was listening, that I was there, I was holding space for them. And I never told them what they could have, should have done. It's always to bring out their beauty, to empower them, because no matter where we are in our life, nothing has gone wrong. Everything, every place is a beautiful jumping off point for something greater. So we always start there. So I just started talking to people. And then one day, one of the women said, well, how much do you charge for this? So that had never crossed my mind because I just did it. It was who I am. But I left that conversation thinking, this might be a nice career path one day. So coaching found me.
And all the great things do, right? When you
Yeah.
when you are authentically there and you come from a place of good, right? And most of those things find you.
Yeah, well, it's attraction. It was always in my core, wanting to help as many people as possible. But I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to measure that. But I was vibrating that for a very long time. So naturally, the universe brought me what I was vibrating.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
love it. So this first segment, we want to talk about how did we get here? So when it comes to weight loss, what are the biggest misconceptions and how did we get here?
Yeah, so we learn at a very early age, whether it's from our parents, our teachers, the schools, religious institutions, everyone has a rule on how to follow, and this is how we should be. This is how it's done. This is how you're supposed to look. This is how much you're supposed to weigh. And if you want to weigh this is what you're supposed to eat. So from a very early age, I don't even think it's inspiration because I don't know that we're connected to that at that time. But we are just given all of this information to try and process on our own. And we just gravitate towards that. It's easy, it's there, it's given to us by those we trust. So we just follow along with the flow that's in front of us.
I mean, it also almost seems like it becomes part of your core values. I mean, it's like values you learn by the people around you, right? You learn by your parents or your caregivers or the community or your church if you're in a religious institution, and that is where some of those core values are taught. Just like your behavior, you sometimes either do what you see or you don't do what you see because you don't want to be like that. So when we say, how did we get here, it sounds like it's that around us.
Sure, we buy into it. We don't know
Yeah.
any different. Here's the store to pick from, and that's all we know. And so we aren't asking questions, we're just taking what's in front of us.
Yeah. And so why don't we ask questions? I mean, I think of kids, right? And even my son, when it was always, why? So why do we just accept those things when you think sometimes as children, they're always asking questions? Is it because and I know we're going to get into the next segment, so I don't want to get too far ahead of the game of why
Right.
we accept it, but do you think it's just because we're growing, we're learning, there's so much information, as you said, out there, so much information coming at us for all different things, not just food, nutrition, weight loss, all that? Is it because you have to stop trying to take in so much information when you're growing, that at some point you're just like, all right, I'm just doing?
Well, I think that's a lot of it. Absolutely. We become human doings instead of human beings, even when we're young, and again, when mom and dad or parent or grandparent says that this is what we're going to do, I never asked why. I just did it because they were my caretakers and I wanted to please them. And that was love, that's all I knew. I remember asking why when we were on road trips and driving, why is it taking so long? But they couldn't give me, they're like, just because it does, that's because it takes so long. So, um, I don't think, everybody evolves at different stages in their young life, but I know for me, I never asked questions. I just took what was given to me, because it was respectful, because it was love,
Yeah.
because that's what I knew.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why we accept it. So I didn't want to give it away before we got there. But before we go, Lisa, tell listeners how they can reach you.
Yeah, so many ways. I have a website. It is www.encourage life coaching, and it's in with an IN, encouragelifecoaching.com. I also have an email. It's coach encouragelifecoaching@gmail.com.
Wonderful. And you also have a freebie for our listeners today. What is it and how can they get it?
Yeah, I do. So this is a fun one. So I do programs when I do coaching, but I sometimes do just one-offs. And so it's a typical 1 hour session is $250. So I am offering today a 60-minute food planning / coaching session for $25 instead of the $250 to the first 3 who email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com with the subject podcast food plan in the email subject line.
That's awesome. Quick, get those emails coming in, folks. You won't want to miss it. You are listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any portion of today's episode, you can catch it on getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe online to receive the latest news, events, specials, and words of encouragement. Go to getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Christy. Thank you, Lisa, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
So during the last segment, we talked about how we got here. And now we're going to get into why we accept it. And it is things about weight loss, right? Things about eating, why we do what we do and why we just accepted it. So Lisa, I'm going to be that 5-year-old kid. But why?
But why? Yeah. Well, when we're 5-year-old and we're asking that, we often get because I told you so, or because I'm your parent. But, when we get to really think for ourselves and we want to know the whys, we want to fit in. I think as you're growing and as you're developing, ways we hear and we learn about doing things, if our peers are doing it, we want to fit in. We don't want to be separate from the group. And so we're not asking the questions, we're just wanting to fit in. And that is enough at some point. Also, again, it goes back to the being loved and being liked. We crave that when we're growing. And to go along with what all of our friends or family is doing, we're just like one of the crew, and so because if you step out away, it's the focus is on you, the spotlight is on you. I think it takes a very evolved person when you're younger to dare to do that. It's so much easier to go along with the crowd. And again, it is all we know.
And I think it's funny is because while I totally get that, I mean, because being unique, I mean, that's, I don't know how many times I'm like, your uniqueness is your superpower. That is so much. And yet I think back when, you might get in trouble for doing something. I'm like, well, everybody was doing it. And the response, if everybody jumped off a bridge, would you? And yet it's funny because even though we're told not to follow the crowd, yet we still follow the crowd because it's bad to be unique. It's bad to stand alone. And so you get that, especially growing up, that's hard to understand. So which is it? Should I be myself and be unique and be different and, follow, march to the beat of my own drum sort of thing? Or should I just go with the masses and don't worry if that M falls off?
And you
I
know
don't
what,
know.
Erica? Those questions in themselves are brilliant, but we don't think to even ask those. Like, do we have a person in our life that we can say, should I follow the crowd or can I step out? If we find the right person early on, it's brilliant. It's a gift. I did not have a lot of adults in my
Cleaning
life.
out breaks.
I did not have a lot of adults in my life who were courageous enough to step step aside. So they didn't know to tell me that. We haven't asked the questions, and I don't know that we're tuned into our inspiration when we're younger also, you
Yeah.
know.
And
Um,
and
yeah.
that I think is important. And I think it's important for adults to hear, and it's important for kids to hear, is that be that person for the younger generation
Mm,
that they can approach, that they can talk to, that they can ask those questions. And then kids understand there are people who you can talk to about those things. And I mean, I was extremely lucky growing up because I was that probably annoying kid that would say, but why? So why do we do it this way? And sometimes I would get that's just how we've always done it.
right.
But then I'd say, well, how come that's all how we've always done it? Is there a better way? Or is it because it's tradition, right? So sometimes I would get those answers, but also I would say I would get I don't know. Let's figure out if there is a better way to do it. And I'd be like, really? Like it wasn't an automatic dismissal. And it was not always a response of I know everything, like, or an answer was made up. It was, we might have to look that up, or we might have to. And so I appreciated that. And I did a lot of that with my son as well. I did my share of because I said so, because, because I said so and I was just exhausted at that point. But I
Right.
tried not to always do it because I know I didn't want that. And I wanted him to keep the inquisitiveness. I know many times I'd have to coach him for well, I won't say lack of better term as we're both coaches, but coach him into when you're at school, you need to be careful how you question, because I know you're not questioning because you're questioning the adults, you're questioning because you want to learn, but not all adults and not all teachers will understand that. So you need to be careful and kind of approach and that was hard. Because I would get he's asking a lot of questions and I'm like, and of course me as a parent would be, well, it's school. Shouldn't he ask a lot of questions? I was the probably the worst parent of a teacher could have had, but it is important, I think, because the more we ask questions, the more we learn, and the more we learn, the more we grow, and we get that opportunity to find out which way we want to live life.
For sure. And I think a lot of the education system, they haven't evolved to the point yet of asking. So they are told this is how you have to have the curriculum. There are a lot of those very creative type schools where they foster that asking. And it's amazing the type of students that are coming out of those schools and how they're going on to be so successful because they were given the permission and the freedom to just go beyond and say, why are we doing this? Aren't there different ways? And then, their mentor would say, yes, think of what the different ways are. That's a fascinating way to learn and grow too. So, we all just accept it because it is what it is.
I think like so if you're just joining us, listeners, the first segment we talked about how did we get here? It's a product of the environment we're in, right? How we grow, how things were always done. It was, the easiest way to do it. We just had the buy-in, and why we accept it many of the times is because we want to fit in, we want to be liked. It's easier than going against the crowd, right? It's easier to go along with the crowd than to go against it. It's all we know, right? This is how I always say it's the corporation killer. We've always done it this way.
Right.
And we've not been inspired, as you said, to ask the right questions. And do we have some of those questions? What are some of those questions that are needed to be asked?
Honestly, that's why I love being a life coach, because whatever we think of is a question. Nobody can give us a list of, here's a list of questions to ask. They can, but when we learn to tap into our inner knowing, those questions just come. They kind of pour out of us. It's really quite beautiful. And when I coach, the term "I don't know" is not allowed in any of my coaching sessions. You don't know, you do know. Take a guess. And what comes out of that is just absolute beautiful freedom. So every question is a brilliant question,
And I love that. And sometimes it's kind of like icebreakers. You don't know how to start you have that awkwardness, you're not sure how to start a conversation. And I tell folks, just have a few questions that are easy questions, right? That might seem basic, but once you start the dialogue, then it gets easier, and then additional questions will come based on the dialogue, if you're really listening, right? If you are not an active participant in just the speaking, if you're an active listener as well, because then you can start and then you can roll with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked about how we got here, why we accepted it. And in the next segment, we're going to get into really the nitty-gritty of it all, the taking control and creating our own choices. But before we go to a break, tell listeners how they can reach you.
Sure. So another way listeners can reach me is I post lots of reels on Instagram, and my handle is at Encourage Life Coach at Instagram. And again, it's Encourage, INCOURAGE Life Coach. They can also email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com and on my website, encouragelifecoaching.com.
Wonderful. And you have a freebie for our listeners today, don't you?
The freebie is typically a $250 value. I am offering a 60-minute food planning / coaching session for just $25 to the first 3 listeners who email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com with the subject podcast food plan in the email subject line. And everyone who emails will also receive my top 10 weight loss tip list and get signed up for my blog and newsletter. So
well, that is awesome. Get those emails in. Well, let's take a quick break and we will get back into taking control and creating our own choices. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Don't forget to visit getrootedradio.com to listen to a replay of this episode, sign up for helpful tips, and learn about upcoming events. That's getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Christy. Lisa, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So during the last two segments, we talked about how we got here and why we accepted it. Now, the fun part and where the work really happens, right? It's time to take control and create our own choices. So why is this, I mean, besides the obvious reason, right? It's always so important to make our own decisions for us, authentically and of course follow our own path. But why is it so important that we do this? Besides, of course, the obvious.
Yeah, well, it is critical that we do this in our life. When we realize we want more, when we start asking the questions of, is this all there is? What do we do with that? So we've lived our life wanting to fit in, wanting to be liked and loved, doing things according to what society says is the right thing to do, how to behave, the right foods to eat to lose weight, the right things to say at a dinner party. I mean, there's always the shoulds, the should nots. And so, why is it so important to fit in? That's a great question to ask ourselves. Is it important to fit in? If somebody asked that to me, I would say, no, I don't really care about fitting in. What am I fitting into? I choose my experiences that fit in with me, And so, do we want to be liked and loved for someone we're not? So, we're trading a life of authentic love to fit into somebody's else's mold of what we should be. And is it worth it? Is it worth it? So, when we have goals and we want results in our life, we really have to start looking how we're behaving and the choices we're making. And what if there were many different options and choices? What if everything we thought up until now that we believe was true was not at all there is? But thinking about our own unique choices brings up a lot of fear and a lot of doubt and a lot of guilt.
Oh yeah. And I think it's really to be being authentic isn't hard, right? It's being a copy of somebody else that's hard, right? We were born to be original, right? It's what that Dr. Seuss, no one's better at being you type saying. But I think it's difficult to go against what the societal norms say for some people because, like you said, we accepted that for so long.
Right.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't by any means. Be yourself. Don't worry. You need to do you for you. And it's like when you're setting goals, you can't set a goal based on somebody else thinks you should do. Well, this is what everybody is doing, so I guess that should be my goal too, because you're never going to meet it. You're never going to obtain it because it's not yours. It's not true to you. It's not authentic. You don't really want to do it. And if you really don't want to do something, you're not going to do it well, or you might make so many excuses so you don't have to do it. But I think people they get overwhelmed. They get stuck, and then they become afraid because they want that love. They want that acceptance, and they want to fit in. And that's where we have to break that cycle so that we are looking, what is it? If those people aren't going to support you or be true to what you want, they don't have to fold to what you want, but they shouldn't stop you from doing what you want. Then those aren't your people, right? That's not your tribe. You got to go find your tribe and be able to move forward.
For sure. And you mentioned overwhelm and you mentioned being afraid. And I mentioned thinking about our own unique choices brings up a lot of fear, doubt, and guilt. Well, this is the game changer. Because when we think of feeling fear and doubt and guilt or overwhelm, that is the very worst that can happen. Those are emotions. So this is the core to getting over to the other side, to what's prevented us from taking our life further, from asking those questions and from stepping out. Because fear, doubt, guilt, and overwhelm, they're emotions, and emotions are all wonderful, but they do not have to freeze us. They do not have to stop us. We can ponder emotions and think about them and process them. All emotions are good, and our life is basically 50-50. We have good feeling emotions and bad feeling emotions, and they're all good. And when we have a bad feeling or a negative emotion, we're like, oh, I can't. But that is the moment when we sit with those emotions and we get curious and we don't freeze up. And once we get over the hump of being frozen and processing them and working through them, which is not very hard. The hard is thinking about, how can I do this? How can I think of other things to do? The hard is just a thought. It's just a concept. And it's a false belief, because something is hard when we choose to think it's hard.
And that's a good point.
Right?
It's like you have the fear of the unknown. Our brain is hardwired to, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And you don't take a second to say, it could be great, could be wonderful. Since you don't know what's going to happen, your brain is hardwired to automatically go to the sky is falling, right? The henny penny, the chicken little, right?
Yep.
And I think that's where it's okay. I mean, it's okay to have anger. It's okay to have sadness. It's okay to have grief. Like you said, those are those negative emotions, but that's okay. You just don't want to unpack and stay there. And that's what people forget. I mean, we have to have all this range of emotion. How would you know anything's ever good if you didn't experience bad?
100%. Yeah.
And I think that sometimes we forget that. You know, we forget that we should be grateful that we have running water, because some people don't. You know, we take a lot of things for granted, and I think emotions are one of them.
Well,
So,
absolutely. And they are so important. An emotion is just an indicator of what's going on outside of you. And if you take an action from a negative emotion, you're not going to get, excuse me, you're not going to get a good result. So when we sit in a negative emotion, let's say we're sitting in overwhelm, which can take over our body, which can consume us. It can, lead to a lot of different effects within our body. But when we think about the emotion of overwhelm, well, what's the thought we're having that's driving the emotion of overwhelm? The thought is, this is so hard, I can't do it. And that's creating the feeling of overwhelm. Well, guess what? We can change our thought. Where does that thought come from? It comes from lazy default thinking that we choose to buy into. And our thoughts are optional. We get to choose our thoughts. It's a skill. I mean, I probably make it sound super easy. And it's easier than it sounds, but it's brilliant. It is pure freedom. You choose the thought. Instead of, this is hard and I feel overwhelmed, how about, this is exciting. I can learn how to do this. What kind of feeling will that drive? Maybe curiosity and eagerness, So you're not avoiding or negating the overwhelm. You just don't want to dwell there. You don't want to take action from that place. You want to take action from a feeling place that is more self-serving and soothing, that will fuel you forward.
And I think that is a great note to pause there, because our next segment, our next and final segment, we're going to really talk about living our full and amazing life. And so we're going to take all the things that we've learned so far, and then how do we push forward to truly, live it up, love it up, and let it go, as the tagline says, right? So tell folks how they can reach you and learn more about your services, Lisa.
Yeah, for sure. So my website is www.encouragelifecoaching.com. I'm also on Instagram. Every day I post fun little reels with tips and tools. My handle is at Encourage Life Coach on Instagram. And email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com.
Wonderful. This is Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any information during the last segments, go to getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com to listen to the replay, to download previous episodes, and learn more about coaching sessions and upcoming special events at getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Christy. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much.
So tell listeners about that wonderful freebie they can get, and what it is and what they need to do to have a chance.
Yeah, of course. So for the first 3 who email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com with the subject podcast food plan in the subject line, I'm giving away for $25 a 60-minute food planning coaching session. It's typically a $250 value. And when I say food planning, I'm not going to tell you what to eat. This is all about you. So it's food planning and coaching. It's brilliant. So to the first 3 who email me, you'll get it for $25 for a 60-minute session.
Wonderful. So, and folks can reach you on Instagram, on your website, via email. So check her out. If you didn't get a chance to write it down, just look at her profile. All the contact information is out there. So in our final segment, we want to discuss how living our full and amazing life. How do we do that, right? And I think, don't we all want to know that? I don't think it's as tricky as people think. If you just give yourself a chance. So Lisa, what would you say to folks if they say, I just want to live my best life, right? And what would you say to them?
Well, you can, and you can start right now, and I can help. So we can live any kind of life we choose, because we get to create it moment by moment. We get to do that. When we are aware of our thoughts and emotions, our feelings, we can literally design anything in our life. And, a lot don't ask that question, like, can I live a fuller and more amazing life? They take what they have. But if you want it, you can have it. If you desire it, you can achieve it. There's nothing that's stopping you from having what you want except your own thought about it. And that thought, if it's preventing you from moving forward, that's what we call a thought error. There's no reason why you are not deserving or worthy of everything that you want. I mean, this is an amazing world, an amazing life. We have so much opportunity, so much to experience. So our thoughts drive our feelings. And when we choose a thought, we then have control over that feeling and ultimately our entire experience.
And I think that's a big key there is learn to realize what that is, just a thought, and then move forward. It's those limiting beliefs that sneak up that perhaps you heard it from somebody once in your life, and perhaps that somebody was you, right? Yourself, because you had that thought in your head that you weren't good enough, you weren't fast enough, you weren't whatever enough. And it stops you from moving forward. And it's like you said, just that. It's a thought. That's it. Let it go. I always like to picture the image of, when people talk and it goes in one ear and like floats out the other when they're not listening, those like cartoon. That's where, when I have bad thoughts and those limiting beliefs, I imagine them. I literally picture them going in one ear and out the other, like they're gone. And if we can get better at doing that, and even if it's writing it down, because sometimes we don't know we're having those thoughts until all of a sudden you're stuck, right? Until it stops you from moving forward. And if you can go back and say, what was I doing? What was I thinking when I became so overwhelmed that it stopped me in my tracks, or whatever the feeling was, right? Whatever that feeling that you had was. And I think we could get forward. We could move forward much easier that way.
For sure. I have my clients always do what's called a thought download. And so it's a brain dump, because we're telling ourselves all these stories. And when they write down all their thoughts, and then I say, read over them and cross out all the ones that really aren't true, they pretty much have nothing left on the paper. So I just want to share something about thoughts.
Yes.
The optional sentences in our brain, the thoughts, create an emotion in our body. And then those emotions fuel our behaviors. It's the way that we show up in the world. So the only reason we ever do something is because of the way that we feel. And the only reason we feel a certain way is because of a thought that we're telling ourselves, a thought we are indulging in and interacting with. And when we do not go forward and feel frozen, that is a thought error. And we just need to find the thought error that is leading to that behavior and change, shift, make that decision.
I love that. And I think that is a great takeaway. If you don't remember anything else, listeners, remember that, right? I mean, because it gets you unstuck, right? It's just like we need to get comfy being uncomfy. You got to get unstuck in order to move forward. I saw something the other day, and for some reason, this has just popped into my head. When I was younger, there was all these cartoons with quicksand, right? Or events with quicksand. And I was prepared if I ever fell into quicksand. But yet that's what some of the emotions do to us, is that they get us stuck and maybe not being able, right. And we can't move forward. So maybe that's what those cartoons were meant, is to learn how to get unstuck from that quicksand. But I saw that a little meme that said, I was much more prepared for quicksand than I ever really experienced. And yet I think with this, what you just talked through right now, that can get us out of that quicksand. That can move us forward so that we can have that freedom to live our full, amazing lives. And because we are good enough, we are talented enough, we are pretty enough, we are smart enough, we are fast enough to get all those things we desire.
For sure, 100%. We were born worthy, we are worthy. And it wasn't until someone said you can't do that we decided to make that our truth. But that is a thought error, and we get to choose differently.
Yeah. So look at it, the server 404 error that you get on your computer. Every time you have those limiting beliefs, it's a thought error. Get past it, restart, and keep on that track, because you really do deserve that full and amazing life.
100%.
Thank you so much for being on the show with us today, Lisa. And one more time, how can folks reach you?
Yeah, please. You can email me at coachencouragelifecoaching@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is @encouragelifecoach. And my website is www.encouragelifecoaching.com. And that's encourage with an I-N. Encourage Life Coaching.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to Get Rooted Radio. If you missed any part of today's episode or you want to listen again, go to getrootedradio.com for the podcast. And don't forget to tune in the first and third Monday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. And before I sign off, are you ready to live that full and amazing life? Not sure where to begin? Set up your free Empower Hour call with me today. No charge, no obligations. Go to getrootedradio.com to find out how we can help you take that action. And if you are ready to live, love, and let go, join me for the signature 12-week group coaching series, The Rooted Life. This series will assist you in achieving your goals, moving forward by letting go of the things that no longer serve you, learning to love yourself and others fully, and living life to its fullest. Go to getrootedradio.com to learn more about this 12-week series and to get that free Empower Hour. Thank you for tuning in. Have an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to the next time on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Visit getrootedradio.com if you've missed any part of this hit show, and tune in on transformationtalkradio.com to live fearlessly in your more and powerfully rooted in your unlimited yes. For more information and to work with Erica directly, visit getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com, and get ready to live it up, love it up, and let it go.